Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier.
Hey there, Alex Simmons here. Yeah, I know you're used to Chris going, coming up with something funny and crazy, but Chris is sick. So it's me soloing this time, and total solo. I don't have a guest. What I am going to do for you is share a portion of one of my lessons on creating compelling characters and intriguing plots and story structure, right? It's going to have nice little screens and little slides and all that. And for those of you who are listening to the episode rather than watching, I will either read or say whatever's on the slide so you're not going to miss out, okay? But this will be a little bit instructions on how to build story and character and plot. Very straightforward, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of it. I know my students have. And also, there's going to be a link at the end to our Tell the Damn Story writer's guide, which has some character development questions and other things for you, some tips that you might find useful, or no, heck, you will find useful in your writing journey. All right. So, Chris, like I said, get better. So you're with us next week, and we have a bunch of things lined up for you. But in the meantime, here is that presentation. Hey there, Alex Simmons here, and this is going to be a little bit of a different Tell the Damn Story because Chris is out sick. Please get better soon, my buddy, my friend, my co-host, my brother, all that good stuff. Please get better. This week, I thought what we would do is I would share a lesson that I share with I would do a lesson that I would share some information about structuring stories. It's a presentation that I give to a lot of my clients and my students. And I thought, why not here on Tell the Damn Story? Chris and I do things like this all the time, but this time you're going to have a little bit of a visual, and you're going to just grab a notepad and a pen or whatever it is that you take notes with, and just get comfortable and just think of yourself as stretching back and getting a little one-on-one introduction into basic story structures, okay? Now let's start with, as it says here on the screen, what is story, okay? Obviously, what is story? Okay, so story structure, basically, it's a framework. It's a way of telling a tale. It can be personal, it can be professional, it can be instructional, all right? But it's basically about having a story start in a certain place, and we're going to get more into that in a moment, and move forward, hopefully keeping your audience or those who must gain something from this particular experience, keeping them engaged, all right? So it can be a screenplay, it can be a novel, it can be cartoons, it can be comics, it can be, again, as I said, a class or instructional scenario, whatever, okay? And every story has three basic components, all right? Now, BME is what you see here on the screen. They stand for, obviously, beginning, middle, and end. And for some reason, it's not moving forward here. Why is my... There we go. Let's hear it for technology. Okay, so in the beginning, what do we have to cover in the beginning of a story? Again, basically, what we're covering is where are we? All right, opening scene, opening frame. In a movie, we're going to see a location, right? We're going to see where we are. From that location, from that first shot, from that first viewing, we can get some sense of place, but maybe, depending on what we're seeing, we can get a sense of mood or atmosphere. We can get a sense of time. What era, what time in history are we experiencing in this particular shot? Where are we going to go from there? So we would get a sense of place and maybe a sense of mood and a sense of time, all right? Then we would also have an opportunity to see who. Now, beginning of a film or a play or a novel, any kind of story, we're introduced to some characters. This could be supporting characters, background characters, or our lead, our protagonist, or our antagonist. So we're going to get some sense of that person or those people within, again, the beginning of our story. And we're going to get a sense of what? What is going on? What is happening at the beginning of the tale? What is it that we are being introduced to? What are our characters dealing with? What kind of life do they have? Are they in danger? Are they in love? Are they in a state of confusion? These are the things we're introducing in the beginning of the story. Now, if you think about it in what's called a 3-act structure, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, in the beginning, we're going to cover the things that I've mentioned, but we're also going to introduce the conflict or the challenge that the character is facing, right? And that's going to be the thing that sort of sets us in motion for moving forward with the tale. Now, once again, we're having a little bit of a challenge with the tech. Here we go. Okay. So again, thank you for technology here. So we have beginning, the location or the setting, we have characters, and we have a conflict or a challenge. Those are the things that are going to be introduced in the beginning of our story. By the middle of our story, now this sort of holds true, whether again you're reading a story or you're watching a film or a play. By the middle of our story, we know what's going on in this world, we know what's going on with our characters, and we know what is at stake. What do they run the risk of gaining or losing as they move through this story and as they're continuing on this journey, right? These are things we know. We are also learning, how is this affecting the character, all right? Again, there's like, for instance, the film CODA, which I reference sometimes in my classes, because there's no bombs blowing up, there's no car chases, there's no gory murders or anything like that, there's no creatures running amok throughout the land. This is a very human story about people. It's very much a character-driven story. So in the beginning, we learn about the family. It's a family of 4. It's a mother, father, an older brother, and a younger sister. The sister is our protagonist, our main protagonist. She can sing beautifully. She loves music. She loves singing. It's part of what she does. Her family are fishermen living somewhere in, I would say, off the coast of Maine or someplace like that. They have a nice sized fishing boat that they go out into very early in the morning. They pull in nets full of fish, and then they take it back to the pier and the marketplace off the pier where they will sell their fish. Now, what makes this more compelling is that both the mother, father, and the older brother are deaf. They were born that way. They have never had the ability to hear. So sign language and all of these things, this is the world they live in. The girl, the young girl, can hear. Obviously, again, she can sing. She loves music. She can also sign because she grew up with this family, so she can communicate with them. She also speaks for them, right, in terms of doing negotiations for the sale of their fish and things like that. This is her life. This is a portion of her life. This has been her life for about 17 years. But now everything's going to change because she goes to school, she gets involved in auditioning for a choral group in the school. The musical director, the teacher there, hears her voice, loves it, and says, if you work with me for the next 6 months, because this is her last semester in high school, if you do this, I can get you an audition for a prestigious music college or university in Boston. You'll be able to pursue singing, your love of singing and all that, and your talent, and that would be a grand opportunity for you. Here's a conflict. The conflict is, do I go and follow this dream, this marvelous dream, and leave my family stranded because, again, I'm the communicator for them in the hearing world? Or do I sacrifice for them and stay and forget it? And then for a sub-conflict, am I even really good enough? I just love singing. I don't know that I could sing in front of a university and train there and become a professional. I don't know. I don't even know if I have that in me. So these are the conflicts. And what's my family going to think if I do choose to go? Right? This is also a challenge. So by the middle of the film, we have seen her wrestle with this, accept the offer from the teacher to train with him, and she's begun that. But there's all these other life moments that she has to deal with, including explaining to her family what she's going for, dealing with how they're going to react. Are you abandoning us? Are you in favor? Do we even get what you're talking about? All of these things. And there's a lot more. So we know what's at stake. Family, love of family, the life that I've known, or my potential future, and an opportunity to gain something that I'm really passionate about, to follow that dream. She's in turmoil. She's confused. At times she's overwhelmed. So these are the things that we can share as we go from the beginning to the middle of the film, okay? Or again, a story. So there's the struggle. Middle, we're going to see the struggle, the person or the character trying to figure out what they're going to do, understanding what's to be won or what's to be lost, and how is it affecting them? Are they pushing forward against all odds, or are they starting to buckle in and feeling, no, there's no way, I might as well quit, I'm going to fail, blah, 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 okay? And we, the audience, if we care about this character, if we're feeling, a sympathy for, an empathy for the character, we're rooting for them or we're feeling bad for them, and somehow we're connected, we're engaged in the story. And that's what you want. You want your audience to be engaged. So, let us continue. By the end of the story, what do we have? We've had our climax, right? Again, depending on the length of the piece that you're working on, we've had a climax. Everything is built up, as the phrase goes, a rising action. We've had an incident that set everything off. We've built up suspense and expectations to a climax. The climax is a big blow-off, whatever it is, emotional, physical, whatever. And then we have resolution. We resolve the conflict or the challenge somehow, some way. Some stories will have what we would call happy endings. Yay, we win, everybody's happy, this is great. And some stories will have tragic endings. Someone will be lost in the process. Maybe the whole thing will be lost. It's down. I'm going to call it a downer. There's tragedy. Someone has died. Something has been lost. We're not cheering. We're not thrilled, but we've made it to the end, or the characters have made it to the end. There's also what's called an open-ended ending, where you're leaving the audience to speculate what the character will do going forward, or how these things will work out eventually, or what the character is thinking as it stands there and the film begins to dissolve, or you're coming to the end of the book and you're reading the last few lines that and so your character is thinking or holding on to so and so, or clutching such and such, or walking off into the distance. What are they going to do? I don't know. What do you think? And you have your audience talking about that, your readers talking about that, trying to figure it out, speculating. Either way, happy ending, tragic ending, open-ended ending. If you've got your audience involved, engaged, hooked, then they feel satisfied in some way, shape, or form. They've learned how it ends in one way. They've also learned what's been gained and what's been lost as far as the story is concerned. And you, as the writer, hopefully have achieved what is our prime target is. How do we want the audience to feel, or what do we want the audience to take away from the experience? Chris wrote a story called A Secret Rebellion. Chris wrote a story called A Simple Rebellion, and in it the character is an ex-comedian who's had an emotional family loss, very emotional, someone who's very important to him. And then the world around him, politically, socially, has gone to hell in a handbasket, and he inadvertently, through some things that he says as he's dealing with his own emotional tragedies, some things that he says sparks movement among the population, and things begin to build from there. I don't want to spoil anything for you. Get the book. It's really great. But one of the things that I want to say is at the end of the story, Chris put a lot of time and effort into this story, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this story. And he has, on the show, we've talked about it. We've talked about some of the things that he went through to write the story. So if you get a chance, you might want to check one of our back episodes and find it where we talk about that. But one of the things was Chris very much wanted to make a statement that readers would have to ponder and think about where our country's going right now, and what it is when we can't communicate with each other, when it's all about who's right and who's wrong and hammering at one another. He very much wanted to get us thinking. And so for him, anyone who reads that book and comes away mulling over those concerns, those thoughts, he's achieved one of the things that he wanted to achieve with that story. So you might think about, what do you want to achieve at the end of your story? What do you want the audience to feel at the end of your story? How do you want them to move forward from there? If you've written something about the ecology, about animals being butchered and murdered for ivory, let's say the elephants and the poaching in Africa, if you've written a story that has that as part of the main theme, what do you want us to be thinking by the end of that story? Do you want us to feel like we need to do something? Do you want us to care about that? Or do you expect your audience to just go away and go, oh, that was a cool story? No, you probably want to get some sort of a rise out of them. So you want to think about that, and you want to make sure that as you're writing your story, you're setting that up, that we care about your characters, that your story is clear, that we've built to a climax and a payoff that delivers an emotional reaction to your audience. And by the end of the story, you're leaving them not only thinking about what has happened during the story to the characters, what they've gained or lost, but also how we feel about what they went through. And if, again, you're dealing with a social issue of some sort, what do we feel about that issue? Have we become more open-minded to it? Have we become more focused on it? Have we become more determined? These are things that you can think about, because, again, getting that emotional reaction out of your audience, even if it's an action-adventure story, getting them to go, oh, that was really great, that was cool, that means they're now going to want to look for what you do next. So, again, getting people involved, getting your audience involved in your story is key. Okay. So here's an old adage. I hope you're taking notes. Here's an old adage. Plot is character, and character is plot. And very simply, he says, for those of you who are listening to this episode, you don't see what's on the screen. For those of you who are watching it, hey, read, okay? But I'll read it for you. It says, blow up anything and everything you want in an action movie. If the audience does not care about the characters, it's simply a special effects trade show. That's it. They've gone there to see things blow up. They get to see people getting shot, people taking high dives off of things, car chases, whatever is going on in there. If we don't care about the characters, then we better be enjoying all that other stuff. And more often than not, that's not really why we go to see movies. That's really not why we necessarily read books. We read them to get involved in the characters and to see what happens to them as they go on this journey. The plot is important. A good plot is very important. But also, great characters, compelling characters are important. They dance together. A team up that you want to make sure works seamlessly. And if it doesn't, then you lose your audience. All right. So, how do you figure out how to create compelling characters? You might, say, who are these characters in my story? Where do they come from? What is it? Because there's all kinds of stories. There's stories that are fantastic stories with dragons and elves and trolls and leprechauns and all that kind of stuff, and monsters. And then there's stories of regular human beings. There are even stories with animals where we give them human characteristics. We even do voiceovers for them. And they're the main protagonists and antagonists in your story. So that's why you might say, what is it? So you would say, what's their origin? Where do they come from? What are they about? What's their backstory? The more you know about a character's backstory, the more material you have to work with as you're moving them through your story. One of the things you want to ask yourself in terms of the overall story, as well as certain scenes, is what does the character want? In every scene, a character wants something, even if it's just to get across the room, or they want to get information, or they want to get a commitment from somebody, or they want to acquire the tools they need to pull off this heist. Or so. There's always something that a character wants in a scene. And in the overall story, your protagonist wants something, and they're going to go after it, whether it's willingly or otherwise. And there's a conflict, there's a challenge, there's something in their way that they have to push against that's trying to hold them back and prevent them from getting that thing that they want. So the more you know about what your characters want, the more material you have to work with in terms of what are they going to do to go after it? How emotionally involved are they and committed to it are they? Again, going back to CODA, the young woman has grown up loving singing, and music is her life, and different types of music. It's a thing that's part of her soul, her very psyche. So an opportunity to pursue a career where she can do this thing that she loves madly. God, what a goal, what a prize to have dangling before her eyes. But is it worth it at the cost of her family? Who she loves, and they love her. So it's not like it's an estranged family, a dysfunctional family on that level. No. So that's very important. You want to know that much about your character. You want to know, in the case of what you're putting together, who are your protagonist friends? What about their family? Do they have one? Did they grow up in a loving household, or orphaned, or abused, or whatever? Because that's going to impact on how they act within your story. I often say that unless a character is born at the beginning of the film or at the beginning of the story and dies just before the story ends, unless that's the case, the character is coming from somewhere when the story starts and intentionally is going somewhere at the story's end. Right? So you need to know where they came from. You need to know, a 50-year-old person, what was their life like growing up and reaching that age? What have they gone through? What have they thought about? What are their likes and dislikes, their music, their foods, the clothes they wear? These are things that you need to know, because somehow some of that might play in your story. Two people meeting for the first time to, let's say, on a personal date, or they're going to meet and discuss something of great importance, and they're going to meet at a restaurant. Okay, some background about the characters. No, I don't eat meat. I'm a vegetarian. You're a vegetarian? I go out hunting, and I do this, and I do that. And you're a tree hugger. So again, you've already got some antagonism going on there, and they haven't really discussed the thing that they've really come to talk about. But you can use some of that backstory information to establish a mood or an attitude between them. Where do you go to come up with ideas for characters? Well, from your imagination, obviously. You can base your characters on some of your own personal traits and habits and likes and dislikes. You can base it on people that you know, family members, friends, a teacher that made an impression on you, good or bad, musicians, anybody that you've seen can be an inspiration, a springboard for you to create your characters from. What you observe in life, Sherlock Holmes used to say to Watson, but you do not observe. It means that you don't just go through life, so yeah, I'm moving through this crowd and I got to get through this crowd and I just get through the crowd. As you're moving through that crowd, what do you notice about this person or that person, right? If you're riding on public transportation, what do you notice about the people around you? How do they sit? How do they stand? What are they doing? Are they having earphones on? What are they wearing? Things like this is food for us as creatives, and definitely material that you can use when you are creating your characters. As a matter of fact, Chris and I we each have our own interesting questionnaires that we ask ourselves when we're creating characters. I have a 40 question sheet that I use quite often, and Chris has 170. such questions, right down to, did you collect stamps when you were a kid? And if so, which ones did you have? He can go that granular if he needs to. We have a Tell the Damn Story character guide that I'll make available. You'll find a link at the end of this episode. You can grab that. Maybe that'll help, stimulate some of your thoughts in terms of creating characters. But again, just to go over it, you want to, when you're creating characters, you can get inspiration from your imagination, from yourself, right? From your own personal traits and habits, right? From people that you observe or you run into as you move through life, right? Every good story needs to have conflict, right? There needs to be a push-pull. If it's just, oh, this is the day I get up and I go and I do this and I meet these people and we talk about that, and by the end of the day I've finished doing this and they finished doing that, and I get to go home and I have a meal and I watch some TV and then I go to bed and life is good. Okay, if you're meditating and you want to just stay mellow, that might work for you. But in terms of actually compelling, exciting stories, especially mystery or thrillers or suspense or romance, you're definitely going to want some sort of conflict in there. And there are 3 basic types of conflict that we work with in most stories. There's character versus character, one against the other, right? Character versus obstacle, some sort of situation or some sort of contrivance or contraption that they might have to deal with. And character versus self. My personal belief is that character versus self is one of the most powerful. And my quick explanation for that is this. In a circumstance where you, let's say, have to go up against somebody else in a deal or whatever, if you don't believe that you can do it, if you're already putting yourself down, if you're already convinced that you don't have what it takes, and yet you still are in this situation, you've already half lost. You've already undermined the major power source for your forward effort. And that's, we're in a struggle with ourselves. It's like we know us to some way, in some degree. We know us. We know some of our weak points. We have those little voices that say, oh, come on, you're not as good as so-and-so, or you're not as good looking as so-and-so, you don't have the money that so-and-so. We're already beating ourselves up. And that's an internal battle. And yet there's an external battle that we have to go through. Someone else that's coming at us and trying to keep us from what we need or want. To struggle with yourself and win or overcome well enough to then go deal with the external is very powerful. Think about that when you're working in your characters. Some sort of internal struggle, and they have to deal with an external, gives you a subplot or gives you a multi-layer challenge for your characters. Here's an example. A child is born, right, into this world of ours, and they are not raised like other children. They have a truly bizarre, strange, abusive, whatever it is, but their life is not what we would consider normal and good and wholesome in any way, shape, or form. And so by the time they reach young adulthood, it really goes off the charts. It's super bizarre now in whatever level. If you want to talk urban grit-wise, it might be a kid who grows up in a really hostile situation or a very difficult on-the-streets kind of situation and has to fend for themselves constantly, so that by the time they reach their higher teens, they have to make some life and death choices that are going to impact on them for the rest of their existence or impact on the life and safety of others. Right. If you want to go into the fantastic, you're born into a small village in the hills and everything, and suddenly you find out you're destined to become king of the kingdom, or you're destined to fight some huge monster that's coming that's almost indestructible. So you can go any number of ways with that. But here we have a child is born, and their early life is completely bizarre and off, or struggling and challenged. And by the time they reach their young adulthood, it goes off the charts bizarre. So if you're thinking about who that child might be, you might have to ask yourself, okay, who is this boy or girl, or who are they? Where is this story taking place, right? What's the location, right? When is this story taking place? And can be when in chronological time, or it can be when in history. What year, what era is this story taking place? Because that's going to affect things, right? The location can be the United States, but it could also be anywhere else on the map or in another galaxy far away, right? What is the tone of your story? Are we talking comedy? Are we talking romance? Are we talking dark? Are we talking fantasy? Are we talking science fiction? Are we talking horror? What's the tone of the story? Because that's going to impact on everything else. And last, what is the message that you want to convey? What is it you're telling us? Life sucks and then you die? Or good conquers all? What is it that you're trying to say? Think about those things as you're thinking about this child, their strange life growing up, and then what faces them when they hit young adulthood. What world are you putting them in? What things are you putting them up against? So, let's look at examples of who this child has been in the past. Jesus of Nazareth, okay? Whether you're Christian or religious or whatever, or probably heard the story of Jesus, born in a manger, the animals, the kings coming to see him, giving him gifts, all of that, growing up, and hey, suddenly, hey, kid, you're the Son of God, the Savior of all humankind, no pressure. That his life truly went bizarre from that point on. But who else do we have here? Oh, Batman. I'm Batman. Right? Okay. Yes. Young child, wealthy, great family life, love your parents. Suddenly they're shot down before your eyes. And as you grow up, depending on which era you're reading Batman's origin, you pretty much dedicate yourself to fighting evil, crime, strange creatures, anything that's going to be harmful to other human beings, because you are dealing with the trauma of having lost your parents that way. Hellboy. Okay. That's truly a demon child, pulled from a demon world into our world, raised supposedly by good people, right? Becomes a full adult, actually, and is fighting the monsters and creatures that leak through from that other demonic world, until one day, one of those monsters says to him, hey, you're supposed to actually not only be the ruler of our world, you're that powerful, but you're also supposed to lead us in conquering this human world, so that you'd be the ruler of both places, man, and everybody would bow at your feet. Interested? And he has to think, Hellboy, now in an adult form, has to think, wait a minute, what have I got here in human land? There's a girl that I have an affection for, but I'm not really human, and she's strange and all that, and I've got a bunch of cats, I eat pizza and drink beer. I mean, what kind of life is that? No, and I'm constantly fighting creatures and things like that. What kind of life is that? Or I could be the king. It's good to be the king. He has to make that decision. Which way do I go? What do I do? What choices do I make? Where do I belong? Oh, here's one. Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah, good old Jeff. Good old Jeff. Actually, there's one before Jeff, but there we go. Tarzan. Yes, Tarzan, raised by apes after his parents get... it's a terrible thing. If you're a kid, in a fantasy stories like this, it seems like once we bump off your parents, then all kinds of tremendous things will happen to you, and you're either going to grow up wonderful and happy and thrilled and powerful, or, all hell's going to break loose in your life. But get rid of the parents either way. But either way, so you had Tarzan, right? You have Batman, you have Hellboy, and now you have Jeffrey Dahmer. So the first one is a biblical character, right? And then we have 3 fictitious, fictional characters, Tarzan, Hellboy, and Batman. But now we have Jeffrey Dahmer, who was a real person in real life, right? And if you don't know who he is, he was a sociopath, and he was a murderer. He was also a cannibal, right? So he would kill people and eat various parts of their anatomies. A Hannibal Lecter in real life. Oh boy, just what we're all needing, right? And he was eventually caught and tried and convicted and sent to prison, where they didn't like him there either, and he ended. The reason why I collected all these characters is because the prompt that I gave you at the beginning, strange upbringing, right? By the time you hit young adulthood, it goes bizarre. That fits to every one of these individuals, right? In Jeffrey's case, a friend of mine is a publisher. And so a few years ago, he said to me, "Hey, we're doing a graphic novel about Jeffrey Dahmer, and he's going to be great." And he said, you ought to read it. And I went, "No, thank you. Really not that interested in reading about somebody who eats people." And he says, "No, it's not about all the murders and things like that. It's about his growing up life. It's written and drawn by a man who went to high school with Jeffrey. So he got to see a lot of what Jeffrey was going through at that time and how people seemed to avoid him or ignore him. The adults really didn't focus in and try and be more supportive, so forth and so on. He didn't have a support system, and he didn't have the medical treatment that might have saved his life and the lives of others." And I went, "Ah, damn, now I am interested." And I did read it, and the book was good. The book was very good. I know there's been a TV series and some other things based on that, but the book was good. And again, character, compelling. It's tragic what happened with him, as opposed to, even you could say Batman's tragic. Yeah, he's fighting crime, he's beating all these people, he's going up against aliens. But the reason he got into this is tragic, right? Hellboy, okay, that has more of a happier ending because, yeah, he defeats the monsters, doesn't quite get the girl. He's living a life. Tarzan, he's done really well. He's got property, he's got a wife, he's got a kid, he's got chimps, elephants, everybody loves him. That's great. Some of these people did rather well despite their circumstances. And Jesus of Nazareth, okay, he didn't have a happy ending that way on Earth, and depending on what you believe, we move forward from there. But once again, the prompt, knowing that one idea, one concept can lead to these different characters, these different individuals, a story about each one of them, multiple stories about them, tells us that the only thing that really holds us back in creating characters and stories that are compelling is our own imagination. And maybe the amount of time and research that we put into writing that story. So, I'm going to let that come or bring us. So, I'm going to let that bring us to an ending of this episode. And I'm going to leave you with this one thing. If you haven't already, take some plots that you've come up with, some ideas that maybe you didn't follow through on, and play with them. Go back over them. Look at, okay, what's the setting of this story? What kind of theme am I exploring? What do I want to say with this? If I were to work it out further, what would I do with it? Where could it go? Think about the characters that would, at least the lead character. What would that lead character be like? What would that character go through? What kind of challenge or conflict would that character have to face? Build the character out. Do some work to develop its backstory. Use the guide that, as I said, there'll be a link in the episode. Use that guide and see if you can start to develop that character more. Develop the antagonist more. And see if developing the characters more, learning more about them, gives you a broader sense of the plot, gives you a broader sense of the world, a greater view, overview of the world that you're putting them in. And perhaps then, in an outline form, start to just map out how this story would begin, where it would go, and how you think it might end. And note I say how you think it might end. Yes, just do that, right? These are like thumbnail sketching for artists. Just play. That's another thing. Play with the story. I know a lot of times Chris and I talk about writer's block, or we talk about some of the challenges that people face when they get stuck somewhere in a story. There are people who like to plan out everything first before they start writing, and then there are people who like to write by the seat of their pants, which is, I have the idea and I'm just going to go for it. You know, we've talked about a lot of that over the 300 plus episodes that we've done for Tell the Damn Story. And it always comes down to the greatest strength, the greatest reservoir for inspiration and willpower is ourselves, right? If we can believe in ourselves, and that goes back to character versus self, if we can believe enough in ourselves to pursue an idea, to play with, not work hard on, not choke it to death, Play with the ideas, see where it takes us. Play with the characters, see what kind of characters we can come up with, see what they could do. Because really, you're not trying to go out and hire people to come and work for you, and you're not trying to hire $100,000 crew to run the equipment, and you're not doing that. It's just you and the keyboards, or you and a pen and paper, and you get to do anything. You can do a story with a cast of hundreds and dragons and all this kind of stuff, or you can do a simple character-driven piece with two people who are struggling with an issue or an emotional state of mind or something that they need to work through. You can even do a short story, like micro-fiction, with one character and one struggle, one conflict, and see where that takes you. But either way, give yourself permission to tell that damn story. Hey, I hope you guys found that useful, informative, stimulating, inspirational, all that good stuff. And please remember to go into the comment section and pull or download the Tell the Damn Story writer's guide that we have there for some additional information and tips, okay? And definitely hit subscribe, like and subscribe. See, Chris, you do that so much better than I do. And be here next week, because we've got a bunch of really cool things set up for you for this month and the month of November. So again, be here next week, as Chris will be too. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.